Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by Data Talks Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events. This event is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Go there, check it out. You'll see all the events we have in our schedule. Then if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, now it's the best time to do this. Do it now, click on this button, and you will get notified about all our future videos. Last but not least, we have an amazing Slack community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. Check it out, register, go to Slack. We have a lot of different channels. And then we also right now are running a free course about MLOps, not data engineering, but somewhat related. So if you're also interested in that, there is a link in the description. Check it out. We're actually finishing now week 2, but there is still time to join. And you actually don't need to submit all the homework to get a certificate at the end. So check it out. Okay, back to the interview. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Click on this link, ask your question, and I will be covering these questions during the interview. Okay, I think that's all. Now I need to get the document that I prepared for you with questions. Do you also have it near somewhere? Okay. Just 1 second. I am ready. Are you ready? Okay. So this week we'll talk about freelancing in data engineering. And we have a special guest today, Adrian. Adrian worked as a data engineer, but 4 years ago, if I'm right, he will correct me if I'm wrong, he decided that office life is not for him. He wants to be a freelancer. So welcome.
Thank you. It's actually 5 years now.
5 years.
Yes, it's 5 years since 2 days ago.
Wow.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So before we go into our main topic of freelancing in data engineering, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Sure. So I studied economics with a specialty in marketing in Romania, and I thought, it would be a platform to statistically analyze people's behaviors or like a method tool. But I discovered that the marketing industry was mostly people that wanted to be creative and not so much look at results. We even had a joke about PR that's basically when you throw the money out the window and you don't look at the results. But that aside, I came to Berlin at 25. I wanted to do things more mathematical and more logical, so I started a business analyst role. 5 years later, I started working in a corporation. I didn't like it, so I switched to freelancing. I have to say I really love the journey, and I would, given the choice to make those choices again, I would choose freelancing again, but sooner.
So you would skip the corporate, the working in corporation part?
I wouldn't, but
Okay. So can you tell us about this story? How did you become a freelancer?
Well, in all honesty, so I had worked in startups for quite a while, and startups are known, or especially, like 10 years ago, were known for being very poorly paying. And I joined a corporation about 5 years into my career, and I found that despite the better level of pay, the level of challenge was much lower. So both the standards and the opportunities to do things. So I didn't like it. I actually couldn't quite adjust to the environment. I couldn't make it work for myself. And I wasn't able to actually perform my job duties, and I was let go. And I was actually too demotivated at the time to look for a new job. I literally couldn't see the good thing about joining another company. And so what happened was I just told recruiters, yeah, if you want to place me on a project.
So that's the end of the story. So how did it go after that?
So actually, he got back to me. The recruiter that I was talking to got back to me with a couple of projects. within a couple of conversations, I was already signing a contract. So my first project was helping a team clean up a lot of legacy that had been left behind over the years and implement Airflow. It was pretty nice. It was actually the first time I was doing that. And I guess I was worried in the beginning that work would be difficult to come along, but actually the projects just kept coming. I didn't even take vacation for the first year and a half.
It seems like it was quite easy for you. A recruiter just reached out to you and you said, you know what, I'm more interested in project-based work rather than full-time job. And then the recruiter got back to you, right? It
Pretty much.
sounds quite easy. Was it like that?
It is actually like that. So when it comes to the fit between yourself and the job, you normally have a lot more steps involved. So, you want to look for a good company, you want to look for a good team, you have maybe 4, maybe 6 interviews. With freelancing, it's not like that. It's more or less like they look at your history, they ask you if you can do it, what you think about it, and you should be honest because, frankly, if you can't do it, that's just going to follow your reputation. So, if everybody has a good feeling, then it usually takes only 1 or 2 talks. There is no job security, so if they don't like working with you, you could get fired within a day or 5.
So that's why the process is much easier, right? Because to get a job at a corporation, you need, like as you said, 4 to 6 interviews, and there are all sorts of interviews, like behavioral interviews, I don't know, coding exercises, take-home assignments, and so on, right? But here you just talk, they tell you what to do, you say if you can or cannot do this, and that's pretty much it, or?
Yeah.
That sounds
You
way
might
easier. Why not everyone is doing this?
Yeah, I think the reason why not a lot of people are doing this is because nobody likes risk. And there is an element of risk involved. So ultimately, you need to calculate with some kind of occupancy rate. And I think if you calculate with it at around 75%, then you might be on the same level as a salary, depending on how well you negotiated your salary.
What is occupancy rate?
Excuse me?
What is occupancy rate, you said? Like depending, like it should be 75% or
How
something?
many of your hours you're going to manage to occupy and sell?
Uh-huh.
So you have about 2,000 in a year, maybe less. So, if you can calculate with occupying 1,500, that would be good.
So this is the risk of not being able to occupy all the hours, right?
Yes, frankly, the risk is real, and for a lot of people, there is a lot of risk if you take a salary that's equivalent to 75% of what you could make as a freelancer, and people's expectation of you might also be different. The process with feedback and adjustment might be different. Some people say, that's a false security. I would agree, since I've worked in my share of startups and I've been on the list and I've seen other people on the list and I keep seeing them. This keeps happening.
The list? What
The
is
list
the list?
got let go. I think only in the last couple of months we've seen a few, right?
Aha, this kind of list, okay. Yeah, but still, like a full-time job is probably more secure in a way that it's not easy to let people go. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and ultimately, you have an unemployment insurance. So worst case, you go into unemployment. As a freelancer, you can optionally pay it, but because at least in Germany, it's capped at such a low amount, it wouldn't be worth it really, because you'd be paying a very large percentage of a large sum of money, which you would never be getting back.
And what was the scariest part for you when you were transitioning to freelancing? So, okay, you told the recruiter that you were more interested in projects, and then the recruiter told you, okay, we have these projects. Like, were you scared here?
Uh,
Like, whoa, did you worry about this?
I was more worried about imposter syndrome in the beginning. And also, let's say on my second project, we didn't have a very good chemistry or team fit. So I didn't enjoy working in that team, and I wanted to end it early, which I did, and it was the right decision. Everybody was happy with it, and I was initially worried, am I going to find work? But I did.
Okay, so you're saying that it might happen that because there are just two interviews, right? Maybe it might happen that during these interviews you don't know if you're going to like the company, and it might turn out that you don't, but it's fine.
Yes,
There's nothing to worry about. You can just say, okay, looks like it's not working for us. Let's part ways, right?
yes. I think the biggest, scariest thing in freelancing is that you're not so much in control over your flow of projects. So, if you want to get a job, you know what to do. You can make a list of 50 jobs, you start applying to them in order or five at a time. Eventually, you're going to get one. It's in your power. But when it comes to freelancing, it's not like that. Usually, the set of projects is kind of limited over a short period of time. So if you look out there, you see all of them, or a recruiter will tell you all of them. And if you check back next week, it might be a different set or not. But that's kind of it. And unless you have your own personal network that's coming to you, which again is kind of like they come to you, and it's not so much in your control, then you might start feeling a little scared.
Yeah, probably we should talk more about personal network, but a bit later. Now I wanted to ask you about your first project. So I think you mentioned, you talked a little bit about that. So you said that your first project was to set up clean legacy, set up Airflow, right? Was this the kind of services you provide, like building data pipelines, setting up Airflow, removing legacy? Do you remember what exactly were the services, the skills, the things you
Yeah.
helped with?
So I developed a quite diverse skill set before because I did end-to-end BI work in startups, and when you do that, you have to do everything. So I was pretty flexible actually, and I was more concerned about being a freelancer than the specific type of work. So I have to say I was quite flexible. So the first work was essentially engineering, programming. The second project was data science. The third project was actually, it was a funny one, just a 2-day helping with an ICO. So went in office in some strange building to get to be all right with the data privacy laws. It was interesting. Charged double my rate because it was on short notice on a Sunday. That aside, I think my third project was actually one that took about a year. So it was building a data warehouse and later creating a team for Urban Sports Club.
Mm.
Afterward,
Isn't
built all kinds
yeah.
of houses and
Mhm.
products.
But for this one, the one that took 1 year for you building a very data warehouse and then a team, isn't this kind of stuff usually like don't companies usually have like a full-time employee, like I don't know, head of data or whatever, taking care of that?
I think so. And I think a lot of people believe the same. So, if you are actively, this is why I think it's not a great idea to be actively looking for work as a freelancer. Some people already know that you're not the right solution just because you're not employed or something like that. But other people just want to solve a problem.
Mhm.
So this is how it comes to be. Ultimately, if you are reliable, if you are able to deliver independently, if you are proactive, you will see a lot of interesting work.
Mhm. So I guess they didn't hire you to build a team, but eventually you just proved yourself to be reliable, and then one project after another with this company, you ended up building a team for them.
I pushed them, right? Because I built a data warehouse, and then I pushed a data warehouse build took 2 weeks. And then it took like 3 months to actually properly define what we should be looking at and to get everyone to agree. And then, came the point, okay, well, now you're going to want to have someone in house taking care of this. So, hired the first people. We got some embedded analysts because now the teams were consuming the data, trained some people, and finally hired the replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Okay,
actually have
interesting.
development.
And how did your services evolve over these 5 years? What are you doing now? Is it much different from what you did
Right
before?
now, it's actually quite different. So I would say my last major project was building, I would say, a prototype, or not quite production ready. I think it's just getting polished for production right now. Of a loading framework, kind of like Fivetran, but for a specific client for a specific space. And now I actually founded a company with two other people, one of which I met on my previous project. And I still do a little bit of consulting on the side. So, but I have a max capacity of 1 day, so I usually try to do more fun things like a little coaching.
Mhm. Okay, so you don't actively freelance or consult right now. It only takes 20% of your time, but you still do this, and you spend the rest of your time working on a prototype, as you said, to like Fivetran, and then you have a company. What does the company do?
So actually, this company that we started didn't have a clear, let's say, objective in the beginning. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, when I think when it comes to starting companies, one of the most important things is to have a very high functioning team. And this is what we had, and we didn't have a clear idea of what we were gonna do, but we decided to do it. So we ended up building data pipeline for company that one of my co-founders is invested in. So that would be Raza. And after doing this data pipeline, we realized, that the core component that we used for building this data pipeline is essentially something that we have all data engineers have written so many times over and over. So what we're doing now is actually we're going to release it as an open source component. I would guess it's about a week away from version 0.1. So don't consider that a launch. Just early open source.
Okay, so you have a company, but this is more like at the beginning it was more like a consultancy company, anyways, even though maybe you weren't doing the actual groundwork, but there were people who would go and do this, and you are one of the founders of this company, and one of the things you do at the company is this open source project or like this project.
Yeah, I mean, right now at this company, we're just building this stuff. We don't have employees. We don't
Uh-huh.
even have at this point. Um,
Okay.
really early.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, but let's say now you're pretty advanced in your freelancing slash consulting career. But back then, when you started, I guess one of the difficult things, maybe it wasn't difficult for you, I don't know, but it looks pretty difficult to me, is deciding how much to ask the clients. Like, should it be hourly rate? Should you ask for project? If it's hourly rate, how much to ask? How did you solve this problem?
So for me, it was pretty easy to go for hourly, partly because it was offered to me like that on the first contract. And then I quickly realized how amazing it is to work hourly, because this means you don't actually need to sit for 8 hours in the office. So if you want to go after 7 hours, you can go after 7 hours if you're fine with taking the pay cut. If you have somewhere to be for a few hours in a day for whatever reason, as a freelancer, you tell your availability. You're not necessarily expected to be there all the time. So it's way more flexible, and I find it to be kind of like a better quality of life. And if I do want to do overtime, then I get paid for it.
Hmm. Okay. And how did you select on the rate? Was it, did they just come to you saying, hey, this is the rate we can offer, take it or leave it, or?
This was the first project, and I have to say the rate was really low. I didn't know that at the time. So I would say the rate that you should be charging is the best that you can. And I say that because depending on how you position yourself and what kind of clients you have and what kind of skill set you have, you might be taking, let's say, as low as 60 per hour if you're working not in Germany, let's say, not for German clients.
$60
Yes.
or
Yeah, or euro or pounds, or it depends. But if you're a little more senior, if you're going on site, if you know the people, if you don't have a middleman, if it's not a corporation that has a strict budget ranges, and they just want to get stuff done and they want good talent, then you might be charging as much as 150 per hour.
okay,
I would
150.
The rate depends very much, also what you're brave enough to ask. A lot of people, it reflects more their own opinion of their own value rather than what they.
Now, because I can ask, I don't know, 500, but how many people will actually buy this, will be willing to give me 500? I imagine that not so many, right?
Right. And part of the reason is simply because they think, well, 500 per hour is just unreasonable for a person. But other people just think about the value. And if you are doing something that is special and unique, you can get paid that.
And a couple of questions ago, you mentioned that you, like in startups, I guess, you learned how to do things end to end. So you were fine doing pretty much everything. So your first job was engineering and programming, data engineering, and then it was data science, then it was building data warehouse. How did you acquire this versatile skill set?
By working a lot, I would say. Um, So, I think it's good to always find work that challenges you at least a little bit. So when I look for job fit in a project, I look to have, let's say, somewhere between 80 and 60% match on skills. And this allows me to learn on every project. And the thing is, when it comes to freelancing, people expect that you will not be skilled or a specialist with a specific thing that they're working with. So usually they do accept that you might not be great at the specific technology or whatever, and you will have time to learn on the job and get paid for it. That's quite nice.
But why would they hire a freelancer to learn on a job if they can hire a junior to learn on the job?
Um, I think a freelancer that has years of experience in both doing things and in learning things is going to be able to learn much quicker and apply way more context and also handle things more maturely than an employee. To give you an idea, I view myself as an entrepreneur in what I do, not just a freelancer, because I need to make sure that I am getting paid, that I am getting clients, and so on. So, sorry, I got anxiety. I lost my track.
Yeah, I also don't remember. I was checking questions in YouTube and I don't remember. But yeah, maybe other thing I wanted to ask you. I know I got contacted myself by agencies. So these agencies, the way they work is they have some clients, they have some work. So they contact me saying, hey, there is some work. Um, Please work for our client, and they take a cut, right? So they offer you X amount of I don't know, hourly rate, but they charge the client X plus 50%, for example, right? Um, so how is it this how they work, or like do we as a freelancers do we like should we work with them? Should we try to find clients ourselves? Is it worth talking to them?
That's really up to you, right? So, and how you like to work. So to give you an example, there are multiple types of intermediaries. So there could be a really big staffing agency like Hayes or Modis, or I think now they have a new name, something with DIS in the name. But essentially, what these guys do is they just intermediate kind of a transaction, and you are interfacing with the client directly. So this means you can actually create a relationship with the client, and if you don't have your own relationships or other avenues, this is okay. It's probably one of the worst earning possibilities simply because these agencies will often take a third of the project value. and they do not negotiate good rates for you because they just want to sell a project. They don't care about your bottom line. So I would say that's fine if you don't have your own network. 80 per hour is still a lot. If
So would you suggest somebody who is getting started who just wants to start in freelancing to get in touch with Highs or some other agency and work with them first?
Absolutely. I think, if you want to be autonomous, that is a good way. An alternative, if you're just getting started, would be to get in touch with smaller agencies as well. When it comes to smaller agencies, usually they are expected to do project management as well, since they are the ones selling a piece of work to the client. So, that means you need to sync with the agency and with the client. So in my experience, this is harder because now you have, two different personas that you need to make sure you understand well and synchronize. So it's actually not my favorite way. If it was up to me, I would either go with something like Haze because, you're completely relaxed. They do the finding for you, or with my personal clients.
Mm-hmm. And your first project, was it from an agency?
It was from such an agency,
Mm-hmm.
so big ones.
And the second one?
From the same agency.
Okay, and at which point it was not from an agency but from your own network?
Well, I can give you a pretty simple history. So actually, this agency was paying me 60 to 70 per hour, which was quite low, even for the time. So I started looking on my own, and I had started in this time to kind of like create a network. So talk to people, to other freelancers, to potential clients. And essentially, I was able at that point to just answer to people coming back to me and ask for a higher rate. And I stopped working with those agencies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now you find new customers, projects without this, right? Without the agencies.
Yes, I would say now also the market has changed a little bit. If you have freelance data engineer in your title on LinkedIn, you will get contacted a lot.
Mm-hmm. So
Uh,
it changed in a good way, right?
Changed in a good way, yes. So I think all these data scientists that have been in training for the last years have finally matured as professionals on the job market, and there is a lot of missing engineering to support them.
Mm-hmm.
So, for someone that's a bit more generalist, it's a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you find new customers, projects now? Through your network?
Um, Now I actually don't look so much for projects. So right now, for example, I was looking for what we call design partner. So somebody that works closely with us with this new tool that we're building to, help us find bugs and use cases. And for those people, yeah, through network. So, sometimes asking people that I've worked with before, or even if I see like a new fitting project.
Mm-hmm. But you said you still spend 20% of your time on consulting. Like how do you feel this 20% and where do customers come from?
Um, so the last customer actually came from network, and it
Mhm.
was the third time around. So he previously came as a customer on two separate projects. It's good to have a network. What can I say? When you network with other freelancers, it happens very often that if you have a good relationship, and by good relationship, I mean be a decent person. I don't mean sucking up and, um, if you are a decent person and you can communicate well, then you will get follow-up work quite often.
Mhm. Okay, that sounds simple, right? Be a decent person.
Be honest and communicate directly. And,
Yeah.
this way, I think the biggest fear for people is that you create problems when they bring you in. So the one way to create problems is by not communicating directly and honestly. If you do communicate, usually everything can be resolved.
Mhm. So how do you tell the clients that you will not create new problems for them?
You listen, and if you see that there is something that is, you set expectations, and if you see that those expectations are at risk of not being met, so I don't know if your work is too slow due to whatever reasons, maybe it's you, maybe it's something else, communicate ASAP,
Okay.
manage expectations.
And another thing I wanted to ask, so you started as a freelancer, but now you say you do consulting for 20% of the work. What is the difference? So, in my opinion, from what I understood, so freelancing is more often you do the actual work yourself, but consulting is you tell others what to do. Is it the correct like separation?
I guess. Um, in a way, yes. Practically, my experience has been that by this definition, you're only purely a freelancer when you're coming through an agency.
Mm-hmm.
Because in any other situation, you're also doing the sale. So you're consulting people, like, if you're in this stage, who's taking care of your stack, then maybe you could use this or that. So then it eventually ends up, well, now that you've told them what could be a solution that works, you could actually implement it for them or find
Mm-hmm.
something that can help them.
Okay, so the lines are blurry, right? You can call yourself a consultant, but do everything,
I
right?
guess the distinction is that for me right now, due to the limited amount of time that I can spend with a topic, I'm not going to spin up your repository and do any programming because it's just not feasible for me to change between yet another uh,
Okay.
in the project.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions. So one of the question is when you talk to a company, to a potential customer, and they tell you about your problems, about the use cases, do you get usually enough clarity of what they expect from you before taking a project, or it's usually more vague? Okay, something is broken, we don't know what to do.
Um, it depends, right? Something is broken, we don't know what to do is also clarity.
Mhm.
And then you can, usually I try to create a scope of work document before we start working, because this helps you define and manage expectations. So, that scope of work might be that we do a spike for 2 weeks and identify all the problems and what we need to do as next steps, and we agree on that, and then we reassess after 2 weeks if we're going to continue.
So how does this scope of work document looks like? Is it like a, I don't know, a Google document with a description of a problem or something like that?
I mean, you can Google it. The way that I do it is quite personal. I've gotten the feedback that it's quite specific. So I like to put in as much detail of what goes in the scope, what is not in scope, things about expectations, what they can expect also about working style and things like this, timelines.
Is it something that you can share, like an example? Or maybe there are examples online?
I can share an example afterwards. I will need to
Hmm.
anonymize.
Okay, so I'm taking a note to ask you for that because it looks quite interesting. And then you said you do a spike for 2 weeks. For those of us who don't know what a spike is, can you tell us about the process?
Yeah, so it's just, taking taking a defined amount of time to refine a problem that is not defined. So when you have a problem and you don't know what it is, then you can't say if it's worth solving. It might take too long. It might, yeah. So the first thing you do is actually define it.
Mhm. And I guess like here the main message is working iterations, right? So you don't know what to do, you don't know what are the deliverables, what is expected for you, what is the scope. So let's take an iteration to figure that out. And then after each iteration, we can see if it still makes sense to continue, to what extent to continue, what will be the scope of the next iteration, what will be, I don't know, milestones, the projects, and so on, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the scope of work documents, I don't know if it's worth overthinking it simply because my experience has been that different agencies have asked me for different formats. So, whatever works. Ultimately, it's a document that you use for managing expectations and that you can refer to on a contract.
Okay, yeah. Um, by now I understood that having a network is very important when freelancing. So how do I go about building a network? Do I do this online and showing this work online, or nobody cares about online and you need to network offline?
Um, I think when it comes to actually building a network, you're not building really a network, you're building relationships with individuals. So it goes without saying that the best way to build a relationship with someone is actually being present and being there and having the opportunity to communicate in all the non-verbal ways. Um, Ultimately, what needs to happen is that at the end of the conversation, you know what this person needs, and this person knows what you need, and they will remember you. So maybe 2 years later, they might get back to you and say, "Hey, you're that guy that was doing that thing. Are you available?"
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the best way to build this relationship is, I guess, work, show how well you work, and then they will contact you or maybe recommend you to their, I don't know, friends who needs help
I think you
also.
can be proactive. What I did actually in my first year of freelancing, I tried to have a target of meeting at least 2 people per week. So I would write people on LinkedIn and I would schedule breakfasts. Like, just before going to work, I would ask them where they're working and find some kind of midway or something that works. And that was a pretty quick way.
Hmm. So how does the message look like when you write, "Hey, let's catch up. I'm interested what you're doing. Uh, I can come to the place where you live and let's have coffee."
So, it's a good idea to, at least from my experience, it's a good idea to express your goals, like why you
Mm.
want to meet this person. So, for example, I think it's important in the beginning to meet a lot of people that are doing the same thing that you're doing, but that have done it for a year or two longer than you. Because this way they have already gone through the steps that you will be going through, and they have already established some network, and they might actually be able to forward you some clients as well and help you out with advice. And the thing is, it's a win-win situation because if you tell them what you need, um, remember I was telling you about those percentages or fees. So freelancers will often charge each other a small fee if it makes sense. So, for example, if it's my client and I sold them something and I would like you to help me on the project, I might take a 5 or 10%. If I'm actually managing you on the project and I have to, check your work, tell you what to do and stuff like that, and I will take maybe 20%.
Hmm. Okay, so you work for a client, let's say you're building a data warehouse, and then you see that you need help with, I don't know, some part of the pipeline, and you know somebody you met before who has this kind of skills you're looking for. So you just write them on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, I have this project, I need this kind of help. I'm free now," right?
Yeah, exactly. Personally, I keep close, a small core of people that I've worked with before and that I enjoy, but this is how you start in the beginning.
Hmm. Okay, and then in the same way, like when you meet people, other freelancers, they might contact you, right?
Exactly.
And they kind of an agency in this case because they will take, I don't know, a small part of your fee, but still it's worth it, right?
In a way. So, this doesn't need to always happen, first of all. Second of all, the relationship between freelancers and clients is usually a little different. So, there is you, when you bring another freelancer on a project, you are kind of responsible in the face of the client for the outcomes. So it's okay that you do charge a buffer and you might actually need to use that up if the person you hired is not performing. Um, and I think it's also beneficial because a lot of new freelancers are actually smart, experienced people that are too afraid to ask for what they're worth. So they got offers for 60 per hour from some British agency when you could be putting them on a project where they would be making 100 per hour or something. So,
Hmm.
it's win-win ultimately.
Yeah. What do you think about platforms like Upwork?
I think they're a waste of time, but other people have had their own experiences. It looks to me like, if everyone can access there, the biggest problem really when you're hiring a freelancer usually is that you don't know what a good professional looks like. So, if you have a good relationship with a person, you will try them out and see if they're helping you. And if not, then not. But when you're doing this online, there's no way you will know. And frankly, you will have a lot of people that are writing bullshit and bidding really extremely low on projects and stuff like $5 per hour for development. Let's get real. It's not going to work out, but the client doesn't know that. And because of that, you're wasting a lot of time. So I think you should always consider what your time is worth. And let's say you set yourself a goal for the month and say, okay, I have 170 hours. I want 100 per hour on average. So I need to make 17K. Give it a shot. If you think this platform is making you that money, then you can keep using it.
Okay. And when you work with your clients, do you normally choose if you want to work remotely or on-site, or it's up to the client?
There are many projects where the client has an expectation. So it's up to you whether you take the project or not. In my experience, if you have developed a network enough so you can refuse projects, you will find a remote project. All you need to say is just no to the ones that want otherwise.
Yeah, thanks. So you said you're working on something right now, on a prototype. Can you tell us more about this, or it's a bit too early?
I can tell you a little bit, but if you stay tuned, I think within a week I will have this first version. So the problem that I'm trying to solve is that data loading is hard. So why is it hard? Because it takes some engineering knowledge, understanding how to design good pipelines, but then you also have the problems that are unrelated to engineering, such as data typing, unpacking data, schema migrations. So actually none of the frameworks that we currently have out there have solved this problem gracefully. And what's worse, the loading frameworks that exist out there have a very tight coupling between the source concept and the target concept. So this means you need to learn the entire framework. You need to understand it in depth. You need to learn object-oriented programming. You need to be a really good software developer to be able to do a simple source and use one of these frameworks. So actually what I've been working on is a framework that makes this very easy. You give it a JSON list or a JSON generator, and it automatically unpacks it. Optionally, it types it, it generates a YAML schema that you can then manually edit and reuse and use as a loading manifest. So like the merge columns, if you want to load incrementally. So basically, it decouples the source from the loading. So if you are able to produce a JSON object or a pandas data frame, it doesn't matter if it's nested as hell or whatever, this unpacker is going to manage it, type it, rename the columns to something that works in the database, and then you can access it with SQL.
Looks pretty useful. Is it something that you saw that many clients have problems with, and you ended up implementing this?
It's something that we ended up creating because of this Rasa data pipeline project that we did. What happened there is essentially the data is available for consumption as a conversation object. And this conversation object can be extremely complex because it has the entire conversation and all the technical actions that happen, like all the guesses the bot might make and stuff like that. So if
So
you
Raza is a chatbot company, right?
chatbot, open source chatbot company, yeah. And essentially, you don't know what you will find in this object because it depends on implementation. So even the schema is not really fixed. So we needed a way to manage a very volatile schema, but also be able to freeze it if we want to.
Okay. Because I heard this, many people want to go to consulting, to freelancing, but they don't want to do it forever. So they'd rather be, because here you exchange time for money, right? But at some point, maybe, yeah, you just want to get money without spending time. Right. Is it how usually freelancers uh, like do like at the end they see a problem that is repeated many times, so they end up packaging this in a product and then I don't know, sell it as a product?
Some people, yes, because they get bored, but each person has their own ambitions and approaches. So some people simply go to 3 days a week and enjoy a richer life. Other people start companies, other people don't care and just work like that.
Just work. Okay.
Other people put all their money in Bitcoin and cash out enough to retire. No joke. One of my mentees in freelancing did that. Yeah, every person has their own dreams and ambitions.
When did he invest in Bitcoin? Like in 2012?
No, I don't really want to talk about his finances, but he took like years of freelancing, and I think he invested in January before the last year, and cashed out in
So when it was already expensive, right? Somewhat.
Yeah, so I think he went like 3 or 5x or something, and he cashed it out in Portugal where he didn't have to pay tax. So like he moved.
That's smart.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you're a freelancer, you can do that.
Okay. Okay, thanks. We have a bunch of other questions. So, would you recommend building a portfolio to showcase your skills and well, for reaching out to new customers?
I recommend building a portfolio of products you can reuse and basically do it again for other customers. And that's going to be efficient because in my experience, customers, if they like you and you tell them that you can do it, then they will give you a shot. And they don't.
So, yeah, this tool that you're developing is one of such things, right? That you can, if somebody has a problem, and then you can say, hey, you know what? I actually have a solution for you. Let's give it a try, right? This is the solution. I can implement it for you if you want. Let's try and they typically will agree, right?
Exactly. So, for example, this tool that I'm talking about for data loading, I'm personally using it to create really good pipelines, but it's also usable by someone that doesn't want to create really good pipelines, but just wants to throw some stuff in a database. If a client wants it done commercial grade and then with a nice DBT package on top that has iterative, what's it called? Incremental and cross database compatible and all the nice stuff with rebuilding state, having a nice dimensional schema, maybe even some. So for example, for Rasa, we even inject templates into Metabase through the API. So yeah, if you want something like that, of course, it's not open source anymore.
Okay.
Not all will work.
But still, you want to show them that you can solve their problems as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so your portfolio, but I guess a portfolio is a good start anyways, right? If you don't have a portfolio of reusable things, a portfolio with projects you solved is already good enough.
The question is who you're talking to. And I think, if you go through agencies like Hayes, then you will probably be talking to a technical person that is hiring you. And then maybe a portfolio is useful. If you are talking directly to your clients, then chances are that those might be business people, people that already know you, and then they won't care about your portfolio. Personally, I talk to the second type of people.
Okay, got it. And what do you think about like character? How to say? So the question is like, is freelancing better suited for extroverts or introverts can also do this?
I'm an introvert. So I would say if you're an extrovert, that is a nice bonus. Yeah, what you need to do is just not get in your own way, ultimately. You're the only person who can stop you.
Okay. What about, so you said some people, when we were talking about, stopping exchanging time for money, you said that it's not that everyone wants, some people want to work less. Is it feasible to, let's say, work only 3 months per, I don't know, per year, or it's too little? Like, is it even possible? Are there people who are interested in this kind of stuff, like as a
It's
companies?
possible. So I would say I've had projects that I could run either between 1 and 3 days a week, or 1 and 4 days is already considered full time, actually. Um, yeah, some projects might run, a week. If it's just like a small helping something, might run a year.
Mhm.
Um, Ultimately, you can also say you've had enough after 3 months, or you
Mhm.
can say ahead of time.
But would it be enough money, let's say, income-wise, if I just worked 3 months per year, or probably not?
You were working 3 months per year and only taking the projects that were paying you a decent enough rate. So let's say 120 multiplied by 8, that's like 1,000 per day, multiplied by 60 for 3 months. So I would say 60K. If you live in Germany, you probably have to pay about a third of that as taxes. Subtract health insurance for about 10K, but that's the max if you earn 55K, and you're left with, I think, 30,000, which is actually very comfortable.
Mhm. Outside of Berlin, right? But if you live in Berlin, then you spend most of the time, most of the money on rent.
I rented my apartment 8 years ago, so I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're lucky. Uh, okay. So now, I guess now you said that you're not actively looking for new projects, but at some point you were looking for new projects, and you said you always wanted to leave some room for learning for yourself. And in this case, like, do you have a strategy between deciding which project to take, which skills to learn next?
I would say I don't necessarily have a skill strategy. It's very much also about what I like to do, because being a generalist, I already have such a broad array of skills that finding work is not a problem. And being a specialist doesn't necessarily help me either find more work or do much better at that work. So I really go by interest.
Mhm. Okay. So if and they want to use, like, interest can be interest in technology or interested in domain or interested in working with specific people, right? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. How can I check if freelancing is for me? So let's say I work, I have a full-time job, and I hear to this conversation, and it all sounds nice, like working 3 months per year, doing all that, and then, I don't know, developing a product and then selling this for millions. Uh, this is all good in my imagination, but how can I check if it's actually for me?
So I can tell you about the people who haven't managed freelancing successfully and why they failed. And I think, if you're that kind of person, then maybe it's not the best option for you. So there are two types of people that fail. The ones that don't put themselves out there because they think, it's fine, I'll find the work when I need it. But you need to build a network, and then this is not a deterministic action. If you do this, this will happen. It might happen, might not. So you need to keep at it. And the second thing is you definitely need to ask for a decent rate. If you're too afraid to ask for a good rate, if you are asking for the equivalent of a salary or something like that, then you will fail, because you won't be able to make ends meet due to the added risk and occupancy rate and all that.
Mm. So you said a good occupancy rate is 75%?
Yeah.
And so it means that you work only 75% of the year.
It means you would be working 1,700 hour or 1,700 hours
And,
a year.
and you don't control when when you work, when you don't. Like, a project might end and it might take, I don't know, 2 weeks to find a new project, right? And so these 2 weeks you're not working.
Yes. In all honesty, I've only really had downtime when we had the first corona wave and everybody panicked and they cut all the contracts. Other
Hmm.
than
Okay.
that, downtime.
Yeah, I think you said that market is different right now. So talking about Berlin, because there is a question about Berlin. Like, is it the market in Berlin currently good for freelancers in terms of pay, opportunities, and everything?
Yes, but you do need to put yourself out there and make your own opportunities. If you're going to wait for the few projects that come at you, then you will compete with the other people who are doing the same. So unless you're as good or better than them, it's going to be hard. But I would say one of the most important things to being able to take a freelancing job is to be available. So yeah, I think you will find something.
Okay. And in terms of expectations from clients, so let's say if we compare a full-time employee from a company and a freelancer, would a company expect more from a freelancer in terms of, I don't know, being more proactive, driving decision making, like I don't know, coming up with architectural proposals, or not? Like, or all of that is in the scope of working document that you mentioned.
I would say people are people.
Mhm.
So it really depends. I'm the kind of person that does get involved, even if I just can't let it go. Um, so, other people, even as employees, you have to beg them to do their thing, or, they don't get involved, they're not proactive and so on. I would say if you are a proactive person that wants to get stuff done, you will get access to the best clients and the best rates.
Okay. And again, just to make it clear, by proactive you mean uh, you said putting yourself out there, and by that you mean networking with people, keeping in touch with, I don't know, past clients, or what exactly?
I mean, you don't necessarily need to keep in touch with past clients, but yes, keep networking, maintain a healthy network. I would say when you work, make sure you care, like actually care about the outcome of the project, care that it's a good outcome for the client. And the good outcome for the client sometimes might be that the client is happy and not necessarily what you think is a good outcome.
Mhm.
But if you actually do what people want and help them and advise them, then they will usually find this so invaluable that they will want to keep working with you all the time.
Okay. What do you think about working for two clients simultaneously? Does it make sense? Does it happen?
So, some people advise you to do that simply like don't put all your eggs in one basket. I would say, yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket and have some savings because focus is important. And if you want to do a good job, I think, it's best that you do focus. It might also depend on you if you have the capacity to do multiple clients. I like to usually have one main client and one side client that is small enough just for, some extra learning or networking. So sometimes I take these small projects just for enlarging the network, but otherwise, I would say just focus on one. If you
So,
want to make the best money, just focus on one.
so how does it look in practice? Let's say you spend, I don't know, 3 days on your main client, 1 day on your other client, and I don't know, 1 day chilling on the beach.
It could be like that. I'm not the chilling on the beach kind of guy. If I go to the beach, then I'm going to be walking around for the whole day. But yeah,
Okay, okay. And in terms of managing expectations, like how do you manage expectations of this second client? Yeah, I guess you need to tell them, hey, I actually have my primary client, so all I do for you will be like a background activity for me. Sorry about that.
yes, of course, you need to tell them ahead of time and you need to be very clear because otherwise they will have expectation for you to answer and communicate in times when you won't be able to. And if you do that, then you will have a problem.
Okay. And I know that we should be wrapping up. I remember no, we actually talked in person a month ago, I think, and I was asking you about that. And you said there is some cooperative, freelance cooperative. Can you tell us more about this? What is this and how to get in?
So to get in, I will send a link, I guess, either to you or yeah, I think to you, and then you can send it further. Essentially, it's a Slack group that is a bunch of data freelancers that are loosely cooperating. Some of them know each other well. And we do, this thing where we help each other with clients. So we tell each other the projects that we find. We do take fees, but it's usually much smaller than what will happen outside of the group. Yeah, and there is also, a little bit of a mastermind network that allows you to.
Is it Germany specific or it's worldwide?
I started it with people from Berlin. I started inviting some further people, but I have not advertised it broadly. So, it's just kind of organically grown to 20-something people. Yeah, there is more work there than we can take usually. So definitely a good place for people who want to start freelancing. It's
Would
more
you
engineers,
sorry, you wanted to say something?
engineers in there.
Would you suggest people to start a similar cooperative, let's say, if they are not from Berlin, if they are, I don't know, from some other geographical area? Would you suggest starting like that for them?
If you are starting freelancing, I suggest starting broader. So rather than creating a very narrow interest group like a freelance cooperative, I would say create a broader interest group. So like a BI group for your or data group for your hometown, and meet these people, create personal relationships, and they will be your network.
Any networking events in Berlin that you would recommend for freelancers?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but in this group, sometimes we meet. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have time today. There are still quite a few questions, both in live chat and Slido. Sorry for not being able to cover all of them. So there is a lot of interest in the topic. Thanks, Adrian, for coming today, for answering all these questions, for sharing your experience. And thanks everyone for joining us today and for asking questions. Maybe last thing, actually, I forgot to ask, usually I ask at the end, is what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it like LinkedIn? Is it this freelance cooperative email?
Yeah, if you're on this co-op and you want to Slack me, Slack is going to be faster, but I'm checking LinkedIn quite regularly when I can.
Okay, thanks. I think I accidentally forget to ask this at the end. But again, thanks for joining us today. And yeah, I guess that would be it.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend, and yeah, maybe keep in mind on my LinkedIn. I will. If you go on my LinkedIn, actually, there's a link to the GitHub account where, if all goes well in 1 week, you will find this loading tool.
Cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I hope it will be fun.